Donatelli. Welcome to Reader Seeks Romance, a romance novel talk show that features entertaining interviews with authors and publishing insiders. My guest this episode is critically acclaimed Latinx romance author Adriana Herrera. Adriana and I discussed her interracial romance, Here to Stay, her multicultural Christmas romance, American Christmas, and her historical romance contribution to the Duke I'd Like to anthology. Plus, Adriana played Confessions of a Romance Author. Enjoy. Hi, Adriana. Welcome to Reader Seeks Romance.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. I was perusing your website, and your author brand is Authentic Romance, Unapologetic Happy Endings. Why does that best describe your work?
I read widely, and a lot of what I read about immigrants and sometimes even people of color in fiction can be really reliant on struggle stories and themes of toil and having characters really kind of go through a lot before they can achieve their happy ending. There's a lot of brokenness in our getting like bright futures. So I wanted to do something that was unapologetically happy endings. Like, people in my stories get big happy endings, and they get it just because they deserve it without them having to have like any major traumatic thing happen. Here to Stay is set in Dallas, and it is about it's about New Yorkers. So it's set in Dallas, and it's the heroine is Julia del Mar Ortiz, and the hero is Rocco Quinn, who has like a very New York City name. And Julia is Dominican Puerto Rican and moves to Dallas with her boyfriend to kind of start over. She follows him. Right as she gets there, he dumps her, goes back to New York City because he's been cheating on her. But she's like determined to make it work, mostly because she has like her dream job. She has like this job at this iconic department store, and she's working at their foundation, and it's basically the nonprofit job that she's always wanted. She's a social worker. I'm a social worker, so I write a lot about social workers. And along comes Rocco Quinn, Italian-Irish heartthrob, also consultant, who is there to basically possibly cut her job. He's there to kind of take the company public, and he's like tasked with finding ways to like cut the fat, so to speak. So they're kind of at odds from the beginning, but of course he is too dashing and too wonderful to resist. And so things happen, but it's about them, and it's about their group friend. It's a group of friends that I call the Gotham Exiles Club, and it's all ex-New Yorkers who are working at that department store, and they kind of like develop this friend group.
Rocco is dealing with some heavy issues in Here to Stay. How much of your career as a trauma therapist informed Rocco's character and circumstances?
A lot of it. I mean, I love to put a man in therapy in a book. One of the things that I don't love in certain romance stories is that you have men who have had really tough backgrounds, really tough childhoods, and then that's kind of like a reason for them being like behaving terribly. With Rocco specifically, because I wasn't really getting into anything about like race or anything in this book, but I wanted it to be where he was just a guy who had it rough, and instead of becoming someone who was reenacting the behaviors that he saw at home that hurt him, he wanted to interrupt that cycle in his family and be a different type of person. So I did a lot of things that I work with in my practice, especially because I work in a clinic, and we only work with survivors of interpersonal violence. So all the people that I have as clients are adults or children who have survived either domestic violence or sexual violence.
How much of your own identity went into Julia's character?
A lot of it. I mean, I wouldn't say she and I have the same exact experience. I'm an immigrant. I came to the US myself. I came without my family. I came for graduate school. So we don't have exactly the same experience, but because Julia is born here, born in the U.S., her parents well, her mom was an immigrant, her dad's Puerto Rican. But like the family dynamics, I would say, especially her relationship with her mom was something that was really similar to mine. And just, I love to write Latin families because there's just something really beautiful about the way that we relate to each other, where there's mothering you, but with love, and you hate it, but you can't live without it. So it's that push and pull of that big way that we love each other. Joanna Lindsay, I think it was, I want to say Tender as the Storm. It was one of her 80s one. It was one of those really Fabio covers. My story is called The Duke Makes Me Feel, and it's Marina Bain Torres is the heroine. She's Dominican British, and she's an herbalist. So she has an apothecary that's gained a lot of popularity in the recent times because she has vigor tinctures for stamina that have been very popular among the nobility in London, which our Duke, of course, doesn't need. The hero, Arlo Kenworthy, he's an accidental Duke, and she has information that he needs that pertains to something that's very important to him. He's been looking for someone. I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but he's been looking for someone. She has information of where that person is, and then they end up having to go to Paris together for a few days as part of finding that person. So, of course, what happens in Paris stays in Paris. And the only thing was obviously it's got to be a Duke that's very affable. And high heat. We said high heat, all of us in that anthology, right? High heat. And so it was basically something that was really sexy and that had a Duke. And so we could do whatever we wanted. So it's Arya and Yin. They are in the first book, American Dreamer. They are the first employees that Nesto, who's the hero in the first book and owns a food truck, is hires for his business when he arrives in Ithaca. And Yin is from Myanmar. He's an immigrant, came to the U.S. as a refugee, and has been in the States for since he was a teenager. And Ari, who's also a refugee, he's the Congolese. He's from the Congo, and they are celebrating their American Christmas. They've just recently moved in together. I'm calling it a Gift of the Magi remix because it's a hapless bad switch, a bad gift exchange situation. But of course, there's a Christmas miracle and it all gets resolved.
The books in the Dreamer series follows four best friends. They're all male characters. What appeals to you most about writing romances from a male perspective?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm not sure why I decided to do that. I think mostly was because this was kind of a love letter. My group of friends in my 20s, I had a really good group of friends who were all queer men. And it was the group of friends that I had right as I'm in college in the DR. And after I moved here after college to go to graduate school. Some of those friends also came to the States. And so I had these very close friendships with people who were grew up with me as a teen and then came here. And I think it was kind of my way to celebrate those friendships and think of them having happy endings and thinking just about a lot of the queer stories you used to read were very didn't have great endings for the people, or were all about being shunned by their families and all this. And I wanted to write something that was a little bit more positive, and also I just wanted to see more diversity in queer romance.
Now, you grew up in the Dominican Republic. How would you say Christmases are celebrated differently in the US?
Yeah, well, the big one is that like our big day is Christmas Eve. It's not Christmas Day. Like we usually do Noche Buena. It's like the big party. People do like what we eat is very different. Like we have, pernil, which is like this pork shoulder, and we have rice, and we have plantains, and we have gastronomically it's different. But it's also more of a party. With my husband, like the way that his family celebrates, it's all very like sedate. Like, you open presents and you kind of like hang around by the fireplace, and the DR's like people are like cracking bottles of rum open, and there's like merengue blasting on the radio. People are dancing. So it's just, and also it's warmer. Santo Domingo is like, we're in the tropics, so it's very hot. Like usually you have a party out in the patio. I mean, it's more like, I would say like Southern California, where you can have like a Christmas Eve party in the backyard.
Adriana, have you ever missed a writing deadline?
Not by much. I'm pretty strict with myself about my deadlines, so I try to keep to them. I try to be really disciplined about writing every day.
Okay, very good. Have you ever written someone you dislike into a novel as an antagonist? And did he or she ever find out?
I have definitely written people that I dislike as antagonists. Definitely. And I don't think they found out unless they read my book and saw themselves in it. And I was like, well, you paid your money, and if you discover it, that's fine with me.
Have you ever ignored an editor's feedback?
So I've been lucky with my books that I have with Harlequin. I've only had my first editor has been my only editor. And I think right now we're working on like, I want to say our seventh book together. And so we have a great working relationship. So I tend to not ignore her advice. And if I have to ignore it, she's usually fine with it. And with my indie stuff, I haven't, usually if I have like sometimes with cultural stuff, I've been lucky that no one's been like offensive and been like, this isn't proper English or whatever. But they'll ask like, what's that about? And I'll be like, oh no, like we just say it like that in the Caribbean or something like that. So usually it's the only times where I've been like, no, I'm not going to listen to this because this makes sense for culturally how the person would say it. I'm like, this is like this would make literally no sense for a Dominican person to do this. So that's the sort of thing where I ignore, but kindly.
Okay. Have you written a story or a novel that you vow will never see the light of day?
Probably some fanfic that I have that probably will never see the light of day. Yeah.
Can you elaborate on what that fanfic involves?
I have like stuff from like Xena fanfic, like just stuff that like.
Oh, I love Xena.
I know, me too. Yeah. So I probably some of that old fanfic that I probably wouldn't even know. God, hopefully it hasn't gotten into the wrong hands that I probably no one will ever see.
We'll see.
Or maybe if I'm really hard up and can't write anything, I'll dust it off.
Well, Adriana, you have been a wonderful sport for making time to chat with me on Reader Seeks Romance. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was really fun.